the truth if you're holding back some of it. Partial truth isn't the truth, And so that's what it's making me think of.
I wish it was easy.
Welcome to the Howie and Beastmode podcast, where we discuss all things business, including growth, strategy, and execution, as well as personal and professional development. Let's join Howie and Beastmode in conversation.
What to title this, and it is interesting. I was kind of rapping with maybe the consequences of courage, and he was saying, or you were saying, does that sound like maybe courage is a negative?
Yeah.
Right? And that could be easily misunderstood. So we'll have to think about what the title ends up being. But the general idea is that I've seen in politics a lot where you'll have one side of the political party who is like the way crazy wing of a party, like the very extreme right or left side of the party acts nutty, and it kind of drags the middle of the party, the more rational part of the party, over in that direction. And the reason why they're able to drag is because they're loud, even though they're wrong. And it happens on both sides of the political spectrum, but because they're so loud and the middle personality tends to be a little bit less radical. And when you mix that with they're not leveraging courage to stand up for what's right and to avoid extremes like that, you end up having the extremes kind of win, at least in terms of the public visibility. But the same thing happens in companies. Why did things like the Enron failure happen in terms of extreme dishonesty and ethical breaches that ended up destroying, a lot of people's retirements and a lot of, created what we now have in terms of some of the regulation that's now required to run your business because of Enron in the United States. And so you're looking at courage having a major impact in political realm and in business, but I think you even see it in the nonprofit realm. So talk to us a little bit about how you see courage or lack of courage and how that impacts you in reaching people with your nonprofit.
Yeah, I see it from a lot of different avenues. One that was just really coming to mind is that, oftentimes whenever nonprofit sectors, especially when you're serving in a very public way, if you're trying to be creative, oftentimes you get a lot of pushback because there's a reason why, soup kitchens have been a mainstay for a long time. Everybody's used to them. There's kind of a cut and dry model. And so whenever you're trying to do something revolutionary, like take a soup kitchen on the go, then all of a sudden you're met with, TABC, and you're met with protocols of, are you licensed? And it's like, well, I don't know if I have that same issue if I was in a brick and mortar. So it takes courage to kind of break through some of those molds. And I know I've seen it. I know I don't deal with that specifically with cleanup, but I've seen it. But then there's also the same way of something that I have dealt with cleanup is having to adapt whenever new rules or new regulations come through and it directly affects how we're serving. We have an option of, okay, well, I can either do nothing and just cut off that portion of how we serve, or what I can do is I can adapt and be courageous and still maintaining service while somebody's about to knock on the big house. So I gotta pause this.
Yeah.
And so, but on the other end of the spectrum, I know that we've dealt with, being able to stand up against certain new protocols or certain new regulations and being able to continue serving, or being able to be even more creative with how we serve, to be able to maintain, what we're doing on the front end for our neighbors, instead of just closing up shop, which I've seen a lot of nonprofits do that. Regulations hit them, and instead of adapting or instead of overcoming and being courageous, they just stop, So
Cool. So in your case, you had to leverage courage in business and in your nonprofit to basically courage to pivot instead of crumble.
Courage to pivot, courage to, because again, you don't know if the new pivot or the new creativity is going to be met with the same ramifications. So you have no idea. So that's part of where the courage, kind of boldness comes into. We talked about, how those words are similar but yet different, and that kind of that daily attribute. And I think more often than not, and I know that I've seen it from the cleanup perspective, the more courageous that we are daily on the receiving end, whether it's our neighbors or whether it's local municipalities, the more that they see you being courageous, the more they're willing to stand with you, because it's not a one and done. And so I think sometimes that longevity of courage shines a brighter light than just an instant momentary amount of courage. So,
well, it makes me really happy. The reason why I smiled is I remember how you talk sometimes about how things travel.
Yes.
And so I think if you realize, or if you believe in your heart, if our listener believes in their heart that courage has a positive benefit to life and to business and to career, if only I could be more courage to speak up about this situation and to share my ideas with the company, or if only I could be more courageous to oppose a bad idea, or to oppose a radical thing that's taking us in the wrong direction, or so I think it's courage to share or try things and experiment for good or for stopping something that's not good, right? So, but I think the fact that courage is another type of thing that can travel in your life, I think we can all practice small acts of courage in our personal life and build muscle. Because like you like to say, things travel, personality traits and other things travel. And so the things that I work on in my personal life can actually have a positive impact in my business life. I work on courage, facing my fears, work on courage, things of that nature, then it can have an impact across my career as well.
Yeah, I was kind of interested where you were heading with that. Now I have a full thought. So thank you for doing that.
Awesome.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, if you're more courageous in how you are in business, it's gonna come to the house. You're gonna be more courageous in and maybe things you stand up for your family, or maybe you're more courageous in what you're willing to do. Be more adventurous. Takes courage. Willing to, depending upon, again, doing things with a son or daughter that they want to do, takes a lot of courage. Sometimes, if your daughter asks you to get out on the dance floor, I know it doesn't for you because you're a mega dancer, but for a lot of men, it would take a lot of courage to just step out there and do it. But if I'm practicing a little bit of courage in business, when that moment comes, I have a little bit, because it's traveled now over to when my daughter asked me to dance at a father-daughter day.
Wow. And we can point the finger and say, well, these corporate executives or these politicians are cowards and they're not standing up for their employees or whatever. But guys, listen, there's not a lot of benefit to looking at somebody else and pointing the finger at them, right?
Because they're standing for something. We just happen to disagree with what they're standing for.
Right.
They may be standing for the big corporate picture, when on the other hand, it's like, well, there's a total opposite side to that coin that we feel like you're missing out on, So.
And it could be, just something that you don't understand that they're standing for, or it could be truly negative, like you think, but you're not going to, your first responsibility is kind of in your circle. It's like you and maybe close associates. So how can you work on courage in your own life? Like, you're going to point your finger at some executive in your company or some politician because they're a coward and they're not doing whatever it may be. But it's just like, let's be honest. I mean, a little bit of self-reflection, we probably have an area to grow on that ourselves. So I'll give you a
feedback.
Say it again.
Give feedback, like we talked about last week. The courage to, remember how we talked about what'd you call it? The idea generator or something like that.
Oh yeah, that book. Yeah.
Well, it takes a lot of courage to put it out there and say, hey guys, people are just wasting these olives, American Airlines. just letting you know, it takes courage to be able to say that.
Yeah.
You know?
It really does. And there's some examples, I think, where I have seen a lack of courage in a day-to-day worker has impacted their career and impacted things that are in business. I'm sure the similar thing could be said for the nonprofit world. But I have worked with people before who, as a manager, I've asked them to try a certain strategy. And because they were afraid to try it, for a couple different reasons. I'm thinking of a specific case. They're afraid to try something for a couple of specific reasons. They literally would not try it, and therefore something that I have 20 years of experience knowing works, they will not grow. They have now blocked their growth, and they've blocked their opportunity for not trying that particular idea. But I've also, so that's one example that I've seen of data, people, in frontline roles who have not listened because they're listening harder to fear and to doubt and to the what if than they are to good counsel, people who are there to help them, right? And so I think that's one thing to be thinking about is like, look for people who challenge you, look for people who give you new ideas, and be willing to experiment and stretch your comfort zone. Because I don't know that necessarily, like, if we work together day to day and you brought me an area that I wasn't doing something, it could very well be that I hadn't thought of it, but I also might have thought of it and I might have been afraid to try it. And so you have provided me some value by bringing me some, like you said, some feedback about something that I'm not doing. Now I can, exercise that muscle of courage to go ahead and try your idea.
Yeah. And I'm just kind of still ruminating on the boldness versus courage. And so I think that there's a boldness of initial trying, initial pick up the phone, initial implement Howie's strategy. And then there's the courage of, it didn't work this one time, I'm going to do it again because I trust him, because I value his opinion, because he's my authority and I want to be obedient, whatever it is. There's the courage of replicating. And I know from my own life, and I'm going to get super personal here because it's me and I'm okay with that. But, there's boldness to put down put down the bottle whenever your wife says, you put it down or else. And there's courage to put it down even whenever she's not around. It's courage to do it even when nobody's looking. It's almost integrity. The integrity part takes courage because nobody's paying attention. The boldness is, there's a lion about to attack me, I better do something or he's going to eat me. The courage is, there's a lion out here and I'm ready for him whenever he wants to come out. That's kind of what's ruminating in my heart. Does that relate to you?
Yeah, it does. So I work for a company right now that's a cybersecurity related company. And I was in a group of managers in this big meeting, and the Delta variant was starting to show up. Maybe that was like late spring or something. And we had paid for this very big booth and this big event to go in person, right? But because things were starting to get better before the Delta variant hit. And then the Delta variant shut everything, partially shut things down in different areas again, right?
Yeah.
So the question on the table was, we want to be kind. One of my company's core values is to be kind and authentic. And so we wanted to be very courteous about maybe we shouldn't show up to this event. And so they were asking all the sales managers what they thought. And everybody in the room, except for me, said we should shut it down and we should not go. So the integrity part is not just whether or not you take, you have that, that your wife said to put the bottle down and, you're going to like not have it even when she's not looking, but it's also opportunities where expressing a valid point of view, even if everybody disagrees, that is so valuable to the group.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's like, we have so much groupthink in the world that somebody who will a little bit put a risk, and my company is so nice that I could disagree with them wholeheartedly. And frankly, nothing would happen. Okay. But it's still kind of uncomfortable. So I was the one in the situation that voted that we go ahead and go to this conference. My reasoning was that the people that are the most concerned about it aren't going to go anyway. So the people that show up by default are the ones that we might as well be there for, because if we're, and then let anybody who's not comfortable in our company traveling, let them not travel. And then it's like only the people who are comfortable are going to be there. And so they're not going to be mad at us, because they're not there if they're going to be that kind of person who's going to be mad at us. So it's kind of like, I feel like it was a self-sorting mechanism that psychologically would be okay. And I got voted down like very soundly, like it was like 100% opposition to what I said. But they were listen, I'm kind of blessed that I work for a really nice company personality wise. But I still feel like when you're in a company or you work for an organization or nonprofit or in any situation, for you to stand up and have the courage to give a different opinion, it's so valuable. And some personalities, they might be annoyed with you. So there's different levels of maturity. There's different levels of baggage that people carry into the workplace. So I can't promise you, Beast Mode can't promise you. You won't occasionally have some splashback and some negative reaction. But generally speaking, the long-term view is that they'll trust you as being the kind of person who can give the opposing opinion, and therefore your opinion is pretty valuable, and they'll want to seek that out.
I just want to say something on that point, a little bit unrelated. If you, in that moment, Howie or anybody else, if you're in that moment and you're ready to disagree, but you go with the crowd, you're harming yourself, not the group.
Gosh. You need
the only harm is to you, not to the group. By disagreeing and then having everybody vote against you, you still are the winner, because you still came out, said your piece, defended your piece, and then irregardless. So now that little bit of courage, you're acting on again. Now you have a platform to go again. Whereas if you don't, you've either regressed, or you've and there's another word I want to use, but it's not a very sound word. You've really just kind of retroacted in that environment. And so please, 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 please do not harm yourself by not saying anything.
Everybody knows that what you're saying is true right now, because there's a feeling that just happened in the hearts of listeners, because it happened to mine, and that was something that resonated. So listeners, when something resonates with your heart, when Beast Mode is saying, take the path of courage, even when it's hard, and you can disagree without being disagreeable, okay? He's not saying be disagreeable, but disagree for the value of that other person, but also for the internal value of having the integrity of not shrinking back and wilting like a flower because you were not true to yourself. You should be true to yourself. And you know that what he just said is true because it struck a chord in your heart. Because something in the human heart, and I don't know what it is. I think with my Christian background, I would say maybe God put it there. But something in the human heart values courage. And you know what Beast Mode just said is true.
Yeah. I mean, the consequences of sharing honestly and disagreeing with the team is only positive. If by not sharing and agreeing against yourself, or disagreeing with yourself by agreeing with the team, that is only negative. It can't be in either way.
Well, I talk a lot about the tribe aspect, and I want to do a series on this, actually. I want to do a LinkedIn writing series on this. But this whole tribe aspect of things it comes into play here. You literally are betraying the tribe. The tribe needs, let's go back to cavemen. Okay. So everybody's sitting around and everybody says, let's go hunt the woolly mammoth and let's go out here because we're really hungry and we haven't had one in a while and we need to provide for our families and for our babies. Okay. And so, but you notice that there's a huge pack of wolves that's in the general direction of where the woolly mammoths are right now, right? But you're so afraid, think about this from a tribal perspective, you're so afraid of the public opinion and the fact that people are hungry and people are getting cranky and crying and the babies are crying because there's no food, that you don't warn the tribe, even though you're the only one that saw those wolves, and you basically put the tribe in danger. So there's an aspect of your disagreement that is tribal radar that we count on and that businesses count on, and you will be rewarded by the tribe, not in the maybe in the moment, okay? Because in the moment you might have to be disagreeable. You might have to share a disagreeable opinion or the opposite opinion, but in the long term, the tribe will actually reward you for providing that warning, and they will come to trust you that you are willing to what? To disagree with the tribe in order to protect the tribe.
Yeah. And it's so important. It's so important. I mean, most people don't, I would say a lot of people don't agree with that. They want agreeers around them at all times. I don't, and quite frankly, if I'm in a group and everybody's making the same decision, I will often make a disagreement because my heart just doesn't sit like that. No, let's discuss another option just to be sure that this one is for sure.
Wow, that's interesting. I never thought of that, actually. If everybody's agreeing, try to purposely take the opposite opinion. That's a new thought.
Even if I agree, and it may be the Enneagram 8 in me that just basically doesn't like that. I don't like the predetermined yes. So it's like, no, we're gonna talk about a no, and then we can then come back and say, yes, this is true.
Super viable. So far I'm picking up on, and maybe why don't you help me summarize a few thoughts that we have so far?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll kind of recap a couple of mine. You recap a couple of yours, and not saying we can't add a little bit more, but so far we've got the human heart has some sort of draw toward courage. So there's one thing. So when you operate in that, you're operating in a way that is closer to some sort of optimal thing. Second thing is, I'll give you the tribal one again, which is that the tribe is counting on you having courage, even if that's courage to disagree with itself. And it's for the betterment of the tribe, of your business tribe, your career tribe, your nonprofit tribe, your church tribe, whatever it may be. And again, you don't have to just be disagreeable to disagree. And then also, I'm going to go back to something you said earlier. Actually, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to give you one more, which is the consequences of not acting in courage can be that I am going to fail to benefit from growth and experimentation. Because, for example, Beastmode gave me this idea and I was too afraid to try it. And therefore, I've just stunted my own growth in business, venture, or whatever it may be. So that's a few things that I've kind of covered. You have a lot you've covered.
Yeah. Oh man, I just can't get off that third point of, and I almost want to hammer it home again.
That's okay. There's no
that if everybody's going to make the same decision, irregardless, right? So with your team, it was, 9-1. So it was 9-4, 1 against, and I could have been the one that made it unanimous and just said, you know what, you're right, guys. Or I could advance myself and be true to myself and reward myself by saying, you know what, guys, I disagree. And then the team is going to come back together and say, you know what, Howie, I disagree with you. They're going to make the same decision. But guess who won in the situation? Howie did. But if Howie comes back and says, before all that, it says, you know what, guys, you're going to do this decision anyways, irregardless of what I say. So I just agree with you. Howie loses. So it's just it's not even the team. It's not even the team benefits or loses, because you kind of brought that up, that maybe the team down the line, immediately you lose or you win. And maybe down the line, the team wins or benefits because you stood up that one time. But we all want to be on the immediate factor of winning and losing right now. And when you don't do that, you lose right then. Not down the line, you lose right then in that moment.
Interesting.
That just stirs me.
And I think the general idea is not to shrink back. That's like the bigger topic, right? Not shrinking back from things that are hard or things that are scary, but instead finding a way. Now, listen, Beast Mode runs this nonprofit called Cleanup, in case you haven't checked it out, cleanupusa.org, right? Yeah, cleanupusa.org. So go donate to them and help a bunch of homeless neighbors with all the wonderful things that Beast Mode and his almost non-existent team. He has like part-timers. That's about it. He's pretty much but anyway, what he's had entire cities turn him down before.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, what do I do? So it's like sometimes there's the courage to pivot and not crumble, but pivot and adapt, and having the courage to do that and not being broken by a setback.
Yeah, you know what? And you know what a great example of that is? I had a city one time who told me, no, you can't serve here. And they were talking about a general type of environment. You can't serve in this type of environment. So I was like, okay, I'll go on the other side of the fence. Because over on this side of the fence, it's okay. So it's that courage to, I'm going to go right here on the other side of the fence. And it's a little bit of dumping hot coals in your lap, the person who's trying to hinder what we're doing. But it takes courage to do that, because now that person, that municipality is not a fan, but there's nothing you can do here. And we're going to keep serving. We're going to keep loving. We're going to keep doing. And it takes courage to just say, we're going to go on the side of the fence. So.
I'll tell you one right now. I in my role in sales, I'm planning 4 lunch and learns in an area that is in the Houston area. I'm planning on 3, and San Antonio, I'm planning 1 right now. And I'm spending, a couple $1,000s, whatever it is, to set up lunch and learns in order to generate awareness for what we do in cybersecurity to help companies. Right now, listen, I can't predict. I literally have to have the courage to go plant a flag on the moon, right? I have to go have the courage to be a pioneer and risk that no one is going to come. And I will spend at maybe one of those events, the lowest minimum I have to pay at a restaurant is $250. So it's possible I could lose at least, if let's say nobody showed up to that one, I could lose $250 plus my time, which is, I blocked my day for that particular one. And so I have to be able to have the courage to experiment, even if it doesn't work, and have the pivot point that Beast Mode just talked about, where someone might say, well, for that city or like cleanup isn't working, right? And yet Dallas welcomes him, Fort Worth welcomes him, Arlington welcomes him, you know what I mean? But one mid-size city, didn't want to have his operation in place there. And so he could have crumbled from that. I'm in the same way in business and in the sales world, where I have to be willing to go plant the flag and try things and have some of it fail, and not see it as failure, but see it as a pivot or a, like you said a minute ago, you talked about how it may not work this instance. Am I going to give up on it forever? Or am I going to have a certain amount of persistence in that process? So there's courage to be persistent. And also there's courage to like interpret circumstances, not through abject failure, but through some sort of a rationality of like, we need to try this again, or make a tweak, or give people more time, whatever it may be, but not like judge the whole entire enterprise by some perceived short-term setback. And you obviously had to do that.
Yeah. Did you say earlier that courage is a muscle? Did you say that?
Feels like I might have.
Yeah. If you did, I want to reiterate it. If you didn't, I want to state it now. Courage is a muscle. And so you're going to have to grow it just like you do any other muscle. You have to feed it good, positive food. You're going to have to work it out every day. And you're going to have to realize there's growing pains. There's some days that you're not going to be able to lift as much, that courage isn't going to stretch as far. There's going to be some days where it's going to take a lot more courage than it felt like it did yesterday. But courage is a muscle. Keep working it out. It'll continue to grow.
What you just said is so big, though. So what Beastmode just said is like, you're going to have feelings that intercept your day and your emotions and your mentality. and that intercept has to be intercepted. He said, listen, your feelings might betray you, but regardless, courage is a decision. It's not a feeling. And sometimes you have to sort of like generate the feeling by acting first or making that courage decision first and hoping that feelings come later.
Yeah, it's no different than love, right? Some days you love your spouse a lot more than the previous day, but it's a decision that I'm going to love my spouse today. I've predetermined that I'm going to do it, and so I do. I've predetermined I am courageous, and so today I am courage. I mean,
oh my gosh. So honestly, so Beastmode and I talked about this before we hit record, but we talked about how courage seems to be a moral virtue. It seems to have benefit in the practical world, but also in that subconscious realm of things that are spiritual and mystical and mental and psychological, where there seems to be a moral good to courage, but there's also practical applications of that in terms of our relationships and in terms of benefiting the tribe, which then benefits us in the long term, in terms of growth and experimentation in our career, in our business, in our nonprofit worlds. But it does seem to me that there's a higher law and a higher principle calling us to courage, sort of like regardless of how we feel.
Totally. Couldn't agree with that anymore. It's right on point.
I love it. It's beautiful. It's really beautiful. Honestly, we should rap more about it. But man, I really appreciate everybody who supports us. Beastmode, we've hit well over 1,000 downloads now, and our audience is steadily growing, slowly but steadily. It's something that we love to do. We talked about before we started hitting record today. Beastmode and I talked about the fact that we love to explore these truths, and we love to explore business and career and growth and all these different topics, sort of like along with you. And we're discovering it as we're sharing, and we're thinking and growing right along with everybody. So thanks for joining us on the journey. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. We love this. We love just chatting about it. It seems like we're just sitting in our rooms hanging out, but I know that somewhere, someplace, somebody is sitting there receiving it, saying, thank you. And, we're just blessed for the opportunity, So thank you guys.
100%. So where can they find us? And if they have a question or a comment or some other opportunity, how can they reach us?
Yeah, our socials are Howie and Beastmode. And so you can just find us there. Just drop us a comment or message and we'll respond back. Howie and Beastmode at Gmail is our email. And so if you got a question or want us to, take a look at some things or just give you some advice or just listen, we're happy to do that there as well. So,
love it. Also, I think it helps us. If you do subscribe, if you do like this,
share,
the algorithms kind of reward that. And so we're happy to do this for free and to do this for the people that can find it. But it is fun to see more and more people checking it out.
For sure. So, thanks, Howie.
Where it's going to take you someplace it's never going to take me.
Yeah, comparison, is a thief of joy.